Hello, and welcome back to another NFL draft grades video. This time we're doing the AFC West. We will conclude with the AFC East. Almost done. Still got 8 teams to cover, and let's get right into it. Hope you are having a good day, not just a day, a good day. Hopefully. Thank you for watching, of course, and let's jump straight into it. First off, we got the Raiders. Raiders, obviously, well, they made some big moves after a terrible season last year. Antonio Pierce no longer there. They brought in Pete Carroll. They brought in Geno Smith. They now apparently have their franchise quarterback, at least for this season. Obviously, we have to wait and see how Geno looks in a team outside Seattle. Um, they have clearly made moves to, I would say, towards trying to compete quickly. Like they didn't go the route of drafting a quarterback. They wanted to get an experienced guy. And I think that's because Pete knows well, this kind of sounds a little more, but I don't think Pete Carroll has a whole lot of time. I don't necessarily think he wants to go through the process of drafting a QB, waiting 2, 3 years. I think he'd rather get a guy that he's familiar with, that he knows, that he trusts. So Raiders kind of in win now mode, even though, well, their offseason moves were kind of questionable to me, but let's see what they do in the draft, keeping all that in mind. I think their number 6 overall pick falls right in line with what I just said. Win now mode. Let's draft a guy. And listen to what I'm about to say. Raiders drafted the guy who has the most potential early on. Like, this might sound crazy. I wouldn't be shocked if Ashton Jeanty is first team all pro as a rookie. Running backs, like generational running backs, which Ashton Jeanty is, at least based off what he did at college, they show up right away. In RB, like running backs in the top 10, just historically, Saquon, Ezekiel Elliott, Bijan. If you draft a running back top 10, more than likely he's going to be a Pro Bowl player out the gate because a running back's game is so highly built on athleticism. And the prime of a guy's life is when he's in his early 20s, right? So it's like, the transition from college to NFL, if you're a generational running back, you hit the ground running. You get what I'm saying? So with that in mind, I think the Ashton Jeanty pick is amazing. Obviously, I have nothing negative to say about that. I think it was their best pick in the draft overall. I think Jeanty will be a Pro Bowl level player for them in year one. Now, I gave it an A, not an A plus. Listen, A plus should be reserved for truly exceptional picks, right? I think Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders at 6 was like the most obvious, or one of the most obvious selections. Now, I gave the Tyler Warren to the Colts pick an A plus, even though that was obvious, because not a lot of people thought Warren would fall outside the top 10. So it was like a steal for that matter. Now, even though I had Gene T in my top 3, top 4 players in the class, getting him at 6, it's not necessarily a steal. So I'm not going to, try and get hung up in the debate on whether or not to give him an A or an A plus. It was an amazing pick. Raiders fans should be ecstatic with that possibility, or just with the reality, I should say, that they got Ashton Jeanty. Next up, they trade down. They had a pick in the mid 30s. They trade down with the somebody, and they get an extra third round pick. With their traded down spot, they draft Jack Bech out of TCU. You know, it's weird. Jack Bech is a guy. When I was watching college football last year, every time when I would go through what happened this week and I would check, just all the stats and look at all the games, I consistently kept seeing this Jack Bech guy ball out at TCU, and I'm like, damn. I knew his background. I knew he transferred from LSU. He was not a very successful player there, but I mean LSU always has a stacked receiver room, so he transferred out for more opportunity, and he balled out last year at TCU. Now he has good size. He's a real deep threat. But my concern is that he's kind of just a 1 year pop player. He hasn't really showcased his ability besides this previous year at TCU. But with that being said, he may have been the best wide receiver available, depending on who you ask. So also something to take in mind or to consider with this grade is that I am also weighing the fact that with this pick they acquired an extra third rounder in the process, so that does benefit the grade overall. What I'm grappling with here is, would I rather have stayed at their original spot and just took Luther Burden, or traded down to number 58 and draft Jack Bech? That is the debate. Me personally, I'm probably sticking at 35 or whatever it was and drafting Luther Burden. Now, I'm not mad at Jack Besh at 58 and getting an extra third rounder, but for that reason, I'm not going to give it an A plus or an A. I'm going to give it an A minus because there is another route I would have gone, but I'm not going to criticize the Raiders for what they did. It was a good move overall, so I give that pick an A minus. Next up, Darian Porter, number 68, cornerback out of Iowa State. Cornerback, definitely a need for the Raiders. They pretty much traded Nate Hobbs for Eric Stokes in free agency. They definitely got the short end of the stick on that one, so cornerback suddenly becomes an issue for them. Darian Porter in the third round, that's good value. So good. It's a good pick, right? The pushback would be Shavon Revel and Azariah Thomas were both available. According to most people, they were better cornerbacks, at least prospects, than Darian Porter. And that's really it, man. I mean, it's a position of need, and they got a good player, so it's a B plus. There were other routes I may have explored, but I'm not gonna blame the Raiders for taking the best cornerback in their opinion at the time. So I give that one a B plus. 98 and 99, I'm gonna talk about these two together. So the Raiders have back-to-back picks and they decide to double dip on offensive linemen. Now, they both are a little bit different. I believe Caleb Rogers, the one from Texas Tech, profiles to be more as a guard, and Charles Grant out of William and Mary profiles to be more as a prototypical tackle, even though like the same size, they probably have different arm length, whatever the case. So I like the fact that they didn't double dip at the same position. They double dipped on the offensive line, but these guys are versatile and that they could play both tackle and guard. So I like that fact. The theory of double dipping offensive line back to back picks, I don't mind it. I like it in the case of the Raiders because I don't think they have a really good offensive line overall. I don't think either of these guys are going to be day one starters, but I think 2, 3 years from now, both of these guys could become starters for them. And that would be amazing to draft two starting linemen back to back in the third round is amazing value. My problem with that, though, is that you're spending two third round picks on players who won't be immediate impact players for you. Keep in mind what I mentioned earlier about Pete Carroll, Geno Smith trying to win now. And just here's several guys who they could have drafted who I think would have helped them immediately. And by the way, you could have just spent one of these picks. Like, let's just say you draft Caleb Rogers at 98. You think he's a good depth piece for you moving on. Spend 99 on any of these guys. Ty Felton, Jalen Royals, Jalen Lane, Marcus Imbow, Miles Frazier, Cody Simon, Danny Stutzman, Quincy Riley, Shadur. It's like any of those guys at 99, I think would have made a bigger impact than back to back depth pieces at the offensive line position. Now, like I said, I like the tackle and guard combo, and they could be two future starters. I'm going to give both of these picks a B, but I think if they would have spent 99 on who do I want here at 99? If they would have spent 99 on I'm trying to think of the best player here potentially. Let's say they spent 99 on Jalen Royals, 98 Caleb Rogers. It would have been Caleb Rogers B plus, Jalen Royals A. Like it would have been better in my opinion. But like I continue to say, I can't fault the Raiders because overall I think it was a good decision. Now, number 108, they draft Dante Thornton, the size slash speed monster out of Tennessee. Right, he was an amazing deep threat for them. Typical Raiders pick, right? Like this just seems like whatever the biggest, fastest receiver is in the draft, the Raiders are going to pick him. Like it's obvious, right? So no shocker there. Bit of a reach, definitely. I don't think most people had Dante Thornton going this high, but I mean, he's a day one wide receiver for the Raiders because their wide receiver room is so bad. I mean, like before they drafted Zach Besh, it was just Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers. Like it was nobody else in the receiver room. So in that aspect, I think Dante Thornton could be a very valuable receiver for them early on. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he's out there, catching one or two bombs a month, like a month. Like he could have the most 40 plus yard plays as a rookie, and I wouldn't be shocked. So I think he will play a pretty big role in year one. So for that reason, I'm going to give him a B plus. And like it's just the case if they develop him right, Dante Thornton could be an animal, 2 years from now. So I like that pick. I give it a B plus. Next up, Taka Hemingway. That's a name and or is it Tonka or Taka? I might have messed the name up now that I'm looking at it, but one of those two, Hemingway. I didn't like this pick. Defensive tackle, not a position I necessarily would have thought for the Raiders. They got Christian Wilkins coming back from injury. Taka Hemingway wasn't necessarily a steal at this position, and I just thought, let me double check because it's important for me to make sure I absolutely have my information correct here. But I believe in my notes, I have that they could have drafted Shadur Sanders right here, right? And listen, like I said earlier, they got Geno Smith, right? But you see a lot of teams exploring that backup plan option. The Raiders are certainly a team where at some point in the draft, and they did. Here's my problem: if the Raiders would not have drafted a quarterback, then I would have said, okay, they're all in on Geno. They went other positions of need, or real positions of need, I should say. But the fact they drafted a quarterback later on says to me, brother, you should have just picked Shadur right here. Like, what are you doing? Um, but let me clarify here. Okay, so this was 135. I mistyped the numbers here. Tonka Hemingway, number 135, not 155. So yes, this was the end of the fourth round. So they could have spent this pick on Shadur Sanders. So this is where I'm really going to start getting them for it. So yes, 135, Tonka Hemingway. I don't love it. I would have loved Shadur Sanders right here just as insurance. Because here's the thing: you got Geno on a 3-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. If it works out, then you got Geno for 2 years, then dump him off and get way cheaper at the position and Shadur Sanders, or Geno's not good, and then you put Shadur in earlier than expected, and it's basically just an insurance policy at the quarterback position. But they passed on Shadur, which for some reason I don't understand. Like that, you cannot convince me that Shadur Sanders at number 135 would not have been amazing value. So I don't like that. I gave this move a C, or this pick a C, sorry, just for that reason. Now, moving on, JJ Pegues, defensive tackle slash fullback out of Ole Miss. Now, I say slash fullback because if you're not familiar, JJ Pegues played a pretty big role in the Ole Miss short game offense last year. If it was fourth and short, third and short, JJ Pegues, he was strutting his stuff out there on the field, and he more often than not picked up that short yardage gain. So I think a creative offensive coordinator could find ways to get Pegues out on the field, and he could be a valuable fullback in those goal line situations. Could even you could even use some what's it called? Some tush push scenarios. I could see a lot of tush push variety with JJ Pegues in the game. That's actually pretty interesting now that I think about it. So yeah, I gave it a B. Definitely, like just based off his ability as a defensive tackle, I don't really think he sees the field, but if nothing else, he's depth at the D tackle position and a creative chess piece for a good offensive coordinator. So I gave it a B. Number 213, Tommy Mallet, however you say his name, uh, quarterback slash wide receiver out of Montana State. I don't love it, man. Just draft a receiver. That's my problem with it. Like, there are several receivers that you could have drafted with this pick. For example, Tez Johnson, Ricky White. Like, let's talk about some all American level college receivers that you could have drafted instead of a guy who's never played a snap of receiver in his life. I'm assuming, right? So I did not like this pick at all. Normally, that would have been their worst pick of the draft, but they pretty much double dipped on they double dip in back to back picks on D2 quarterbacks. I don't know if that's ever been like that might have been a first in NFL history. And here's my problem. Cam Miller, I got nothing against the guy. I've watched the guy play in week 1 against Colorado. He had a really good game. But brother, you essentially chose Cam Miller over Shadur Sanders. That's what you did because you could have had Shadur Sanders multiple points. They passed on Shadur Sanders one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 times. They passed on Shadur Sanders, and they decided to take Cam Miller. That means that they think Cam Miller is more valuable, better, whatever you want to call it. They think he's better than Shadur. That is objectively wrong. I don't care what anybody says. Cam Miller is not even close to the potential of a quarterback as Shadur Sanders. So that's a massive miss, in my opinion. And it's terrible. It is terrible drafting by the Raiders on these 2 picks specifically. You could have had. Well, we'll get to that later. But I gave this pick an F. You can't do that, man. Tez. You could have had Tez Johnson and Ricky White in back to back. Think about that. Back to back picks right here. Tez Johnson, Ricky White for a team with a terrible receiving room. And by the way, Ricky White plays in Vegas. They probably know everything about him. They didn't draft him right here. That's shocking to me. So yeah, terrible, terrible picks back to back here by the Raiders. And really crippled their draft rate, by the way. Like these 2 picks just the Raiders are having a really good draft. These 2 picks struck back to back, crushed their overall draft score. And then Cody Lindenberg, linebacker out of Minnesota. This is actually a really good pick in the 220s to get a guy that could potentially make your day one roster. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. But I believe this guy had like a 4th round grade on him. So to get him in the 7th, that's great value. Also, by the way, linebacker being a position of need for the Raiders. So for that reason, I give this their steal of the draft, and I give it an A minus overall. So you look at the Raiders, their summary of the draft, 11 picks. That's a lot of picks. So they did get some really good players. Let me emphasize that fact, first of all. Um, but they really fumbled their draft towards the end. They passed on Shedeur Sanders for Cam Miller. And I mentioned at the end, they could have had Tez Johnson, Ricky White. They could have had Ashton Jeanty, Luther Burden, Shedeur Sanders, Ricky White, Tez Johnson. They could have loaded this offense for the present, but also for the future. So I really think the Raiders, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but I could have done a much better job drafting than the Raiders would have. In my opinion, Okay, that's just my opinion. But yeah, Raiders fumbled this draft pretty hard at the end there. But besides all those negatives, a pretty good draft. They got Ginty, they got two receivers with a lot of upside. They got two really good depth pieces on the offensive line, and they got a couple guys on the defensive side. Darian Porter, what's his name? Cody Lindenberg. Like they got a couple guys on the defensive side that could also play some big impacts for them. So yeah, with 11 picks, obviously you got to hit on a couple of them. But those back to back picks, I've not been very what's it called official with a lot of the things I say on here. Those picks pretty much back to back were probably the worst of the draft right there, back to back. So I'll say that confidently. Moving on, Denver Broncos. Shocking season last year, led by first year of their head coach, Sean Payton, and rookie quarterback Bo Nix. They shocked everybody, made the playoffs, won 10 games, I think, actually, which is, yeah, like I said, shocking. Now they look to fill a few holes that they had. It was a good roster overall, but they look to fill the few holes that they have and improve from a 10-win surprise team to a 12 or even 13-win contender. So let's see how they decided to do that. First round, they drafted Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. This was an amazing pick. It really was. I mean, I didn't think Jahdae Barron would be available at number 20. He was the first real cornerback drafted, but besides Travis Hunter. So I gave this pick an A plus. I thought it was their best pick overall and their steal of the draft. I hadn't really considered cornerback for the Broncos specifically. I had Jahdae Barron mocked in this range a lot to the Steelers and the Buccaneers, but he went in between that at 20. He is going to be a day one starter for them, probably in the slot. I mean, I guess you could kick Riley Moss in there if you think Barron would be a better boundary corner. But whatever route they decide to go, Jahdae Barron, Riley Moss, and Pat Surtain is an amazing cornerback trio. Like that, you're talking about three guys, by the way, on rookie contracts. I think Pat Surtain, he was a first round pick, right? So I think he is still technically on his rookie deal. Let me verify that real quick, because if that's true, they would have three potential Pro Bowl cornerbacks making no money whatsoever. Let me verify. Pat Surtain, how long has he played? He won Defensive Player of the Year, didn't he? Just now. I mean, he's a good player. Kind of overrated in my opinion, but that's a topic for another day. Pat Surtain. He's played 4 seasons. Was he drafted in the first round? Yes, he was. So this season he'll be his fifth year option. So not really. That's kind of an irrelevant point, but man, the Broncos hit when they draft cornerbacks. They hit. Let me just put it that way. So yeah, A plus, great pick, steal the draft. Number 60, R.J. Harvey. You know, when it comes to this pick, I was very confident that the Broncos will draft a running back in their first two picks, especially when they didn't draft it at number 20. You kind of circled number 60 and like, oh, well, that seems like a running back spot for the Broncos. Now, R.J. Harvey, was he the guy I was thinking out? Was he the guy I was thinking of at this spot? No. I would have personally gone with guys like Cam Skattebo or Caleb Johnson. Now, you can make a strong argument that R.J. Harvey is a great scheme fit for Sean Payton because of his receiving ability and things like that. But when I look at R.J. Harvey, I don't see a great pass blocker, for example. And I think Cam Skattebo is going to be a better pass blocker and a better pass catcher because he showed both those things at the college level. Is R.J. Harvey faster than Cam Skattebo? Yes. He's more athletic? Yes. But, it's a difference in opinion. I personally would have gone Skattebo with this pick, but you can't blame Sean Payton for drafting, in his opinion, the best scheme fit at the position. So, by the way, also, R.J. Harvey, I have to assume he is going to be successful in the Broncos. Like every player you can think of in the Broncos last several years has been like 1,000 yard from scrimmage. Like even Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon were like 1,000 yard from scrimmage guys with the Broncos. So I absolutely think RJ Harvey will be successful. He was a dog, by the way, at UCF. They were a terrible team last year. Without RJ Harvey, they might have not won a game. That's how bad they were last year. But RJ Harvey was absolutely amazing for UCF. So I give it an A minus just because I think he will be so successful. So I'm going to trust Sean Payton with this pick. Now, next up, Pat Bryant, wide receiver out of Illinois. Now, this is just a personal thing. I really like the Broncos receiving room. It's extremely young. Cortland Sutton's the only vet in the room, really. You got Marvin Mims. You got Marvin Mims, Devon Vele, Troy Franklin. Three young players I all trust and I all believe in, right? Now, I personally would not have drafted a receiver in this draft. I would have drafted a tight end, for example. They did not do that. They went receiver here with Pat Bryant. Now, personally, I think it's a reach. I think if you were going to draft a receiver here, right? Ty Felton, Jalen Royals, Jalen Noel, Jalen Lane, Alec Iomanner, Torrey Horton. There's a lot of routes you could have gone here at receiver before I looked at Pat Bryant personally. Um, I think he's probably going to be their wide receiver five to open the season. Is wide receiver like this is my thought process, right? For a team trying to contend for a Super Bowl, really, like that's your goal with a rookie quarterback or a good quarterback on a rookie contract. Is what I'm trying to say is a wide receiver five at the top of the third round where you should be going at here? I don't think so. So I'm gonna give it a B minus. My instinct tells me that if Sean Payton drafts a receiver here, he's going to be pretty successful. But I like Troy Franklin. I like Marvin Mims. I like Devon Bailey. I don't I don't want any of those guys to lose their spot to Pat Bryant. So I'm kind of rooting against this pick in a way. But yeah, I'm gonna give it a B minus out of spite, really. Moving on. Savion Jones, edge rusher out of LSU at number 101. I like the pick. I'm gonna give it a B plus. It's pretty simple. If you look at the Broncos, they actually have a lot of expiring contracts on their defensive line coming up. So it's really important actually that they draft some depth pieces on that line. Savion Jones, one of those guys. It's a good value pick. It is a position of need. And 2 years from now, he could be a surprising starter, if you will. Because you think of the Broncos' strength, you think cornerback and their D line. Now, Savion Jones probably won't get a whole lot of opportunity early on, but if he develops right, he could be a monster, 2, 3 years from now. So I like this pick. It was a sneaky position of need for us. So I'm gonna give it a B plus. Next up, Quay Robinson, edge rusher out of Alabama. Now here's what I don't understand: double dipping. So I mentioned earlier, it's not really a need right now. It's a need in the future. Drafting Savion Jones at 101 completely solves that issue. So drafting double dipping at one of your strongest positions after already addressing it for the future, I don't understand that whatsoever. Also, on top of that, Quay Robinson, he's an injury prone guy. He's only started 5 games in his career at Alabama. So all these factors going into it, I probably actually now I'm talking myself into giving it less than a C. I really don't have any positives here for this pick. I mean, yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand double dipping here. I think you could have gone tight end. Do I retroactively go back and edit this pick and drop the grade? I'm not so sure. I would have gone tight end here. I would have gone some other directions. I don't love the pick, so I think it was their worst pick of the draft, pretty clearly here. And then Jeremy Crawshaw, um, punter out of Florida. I mean, how am I supposed to grade special team picks? Who knows? This guy could be an all pro in the future. So I pretty much just give every special teams pick like a C. Like if you draft a long snapper or a punter or a center or something like that. Not if you draft a long. If you draft a punter or a kicker, I'm just going to give it a C. So yeah, I don't know how to grade that pick. And then Caleb Lawner, 1 year starter or 1 year player, I should say, at Utah. Used to play basketball. Only started playing football last year. I don't think he's going to make the roster personally, so I'm not going to grade that pick. Um, Overall, uh, like I said earlier, it's a good roster. Not a whole lot of not a whole lot of holes. Get it? The only two impact players I see here are Jade Barron, R.J. Harvey. Now, obviously, Pat Ryan, Savion Jones. I expect both those guys to find a role in due time. I think, like I said, the first two picks I see both being big time players for them. Their last three picks I think were pretty disappointing. Didn't do a whole lot with that, and I think they also reached on the R.J. Harvey and the Pat Bryant picks. Like for example, I feel like you could have got Harvey at 74 and Bryant at like 101 or even 134, possibly. So, you know, that I feel like I had to mention that as well. So overall, a good draft. Not a whole lot of picks either. So I think they did do a pretty good job with their first four and capitalizing on it. But yeah, last three picks pretty disappointing. They didn't really have any excellent picks, in my opinion, after the Jahdae Barron selection. So that's what we got for the Broncos. Moving on to the LA Chargers. Harbaugh's first year as the coach last year, I think he immediately showed that he is a little bit better than what Brandon Staley had going on. Kind of changed the identity of the Chargers in just 1 year, turned them into a physical run first team. Now, I don't know if that's the best way to utilize the roster when you have Justin Herbert as the quarterback, but the flip side to that would be they didn't have a great dumbass. They didn't have a great room of wide receivers. So I guess they're trying to fix that. They definitely addressed that in the draft this year. And let's see, keeping all that in mind, what they decide to do here in the draft. Now, number 22, they draft Omarion Hampton. This was a pick that I was mocking a lot more often as the draft like kind of came a little bit closer. I like the pick. Now, the only thing that makes me kind of question this pick a little bit is that they went out and got Najee Harris. That was a move I liked. I think Najee Harris is an extremely underrated player. Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton are very similar. Like they're almost identical in their play style. Neither of them are necessarily excellent on third down. I would assume Najee Harris would be the guy you go to as your more receiving back and pass blocker. So does that limit Omarion Hampton? Day one, I would assume so. I would assume that Hampton and Najee Harris are going to be splitting carries. Like even though I think Hampton's a great guy, Najee Harris, he's been a Pro Bowler. Like he's like let's not disrespect Najee Harris. He has been 1,000 yard rusher, I think, every year of his career in the NFL. So like it's weird. You would expect the first round running back to come in, be the bell cow, and just kind of take over. But Omarion Hampton, he's going to be like a first, second down guy. And then, but I would assume you also want to get like, listen, it's a good problem to have two really good running backs. So maybe that's just what the what's it called? The Chargers are looking to be now, you know. But it's interesting that you would draft Hampton when he has a very similar play style to 1,000 yard rusher you already have on the team. So I think Najee Harris is like a really short term deal. So 2 years from now, Hampton could just be the guy. Like he could be an All Pro 1,500 yard rusher for the Chargers. But immediately it looks a little bit weird. So I gave it an A-. I like the fit. I like the player. Good value, all that. But weird that they pair him with Najee Harris. Number 55, they draft Trey Harris. Amazing pick. I was higher on Trey Harris than I think most people. I just look at his size, his game speed, what he can do, like his actual, like a lot of big receivers, like it looks like you think they would be great contested catch guys, but not all those guys have the numbers to back it up. Trey Harris has the contested catch rate to actually back up him being a big physical outside receiver. I've just been high on Trey Harris. I don't know. He was also, by the way, if he would not have dealt with the litany of injuries he had last year, he absolutely would have won the Biletnikoff. He was averaging like 200 yards a game the first month of the season or whatever it was. It was outstanding. So yeah, I was hoping my Seahawks drafted him at number 50, or yeah, just a couple picks before this. So we didn't draft him. Chargers got him. I love it. I think he'll be a day one starter. I mean, he was the best wide receiver available, in my opinion, at a position of need, and he'll be a day one starter. That's an A+ pick, like no doubts about it. So love this pick for the Chargers. And the wide receiver room of Trey Harris, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston. I mean, that's dangerous to think about. That could be really, really good if the Chargers decide to let it rip from time to time. So I'm gonna be watching that very closely. And then Jamari Caldwell, defensive tackle out of Oregon. Now, defensive tackle was a need for the Chargers after losing Poona Ford via free agency. It was a major reach according to the ESPN people that graded this pick. Well, just they had Caldwell around 200 something. So to draft him in the third round definitely is a reach according to them. But like I said, position of need. Here's just a couple of guys I probably would have taken ahead of him. Deion Walker out of Kentucky, Ty Robinson out of Nebraska, and Aeneas Peal out of Virginia Tech. All guys I personally would have drafted right here, but Jim Harbaugh probably sees something in Caldwell that I was not aware of. Also, I did not mention this for the Omarion Hampton pick. In terms of guys that they could have drafted, that they did not draft. Matthew Golden, Luther Burden. They could have gone edge rusher here, certainly. What really shocked me with this pick at number 22 for them, when Will Johnson was falling, right? Because when it got to number 22, like it was a very obvious fall for Will Johnson. Shedeur was getting all the attention at this point, but it's shocking. Like well, I was talking to my friend during the draft. I'm like, you know what? If if Will Johnson falls past Harbaugh, that's how I know this injury stuff with him is serious. Because if anybody, like, if Harbaugh passes on his All American like star cornerback that helped him win a national championship, and cornerback is like kind of a need, I would say for the Chargers. Like, if he passed on Johnson, that lets me know that it is serious, whatever's going on with him. So I wanted to mention that before we move on. Number 125, Kyle Kennard, edge rusher out of South Carolina. I believe he was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So it's kind of shocking to me how he falls this far. It's probably just a situation like if you place him in any other draft class, he's a second or third round pick, but somehow he falls to 125 in this stacked D line draft class. He's just the Joey Bosa replacement. I mean, it's a good value pick. I don't know if he starts immediately day one, but man, this is just a really, really good player here. So I'm going to give this an A. And is this their steal of the draft? No, no, it's not their steal, but it was close. It was close to being their steal of the draft. Great pick here by the Chargers in the fourth round. Next up, Keandre Lambert Smith, wide receiver out of Auburn. I like the fact that they draft multiple receivers here. Probably a slight reach for Lambert Smith. I saw him ranked in the 200s according to ESPN. But listen, Auburn's pass game was atrocious last year, and he still had close to 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. So he was the best in a really bad situation. So that's impressive to me. Um, Personally, I might be thinking guys like Torrey Horton, LeJounte Wester, Tez Johnson, maybe in the later rounds of this draft. Like, I don't know if you had to draft Lambert Smith at 158, but the Chargers fans, they were happy with it. So I'm going to give it a B. He's probably a wide receiver 5 behind Mike Williams, but he could potentially work his way into being a impact player in the future. Next up, Oronde Gadsden or Gadsden, weird name there. Tight end out of Syracuse. He was a big time pass catcher for them. A big part of why they were such a successful passing offense last season. Um, Definitely a position of need. I think long term, you look at like Will Dissly, for example, not what you want. Tyler Conklin as well. They don't really have some big weapon at the tight end position, but maybe he can turn into that guy in the future. So I like this pick. I like the upside going forward. So I give it a B plus for the Chargers. Really nailing it. So I mean, look at their first 6 picks. Their worst pick in the draft was a B minus. So yeah, they're doing pretty good this draft so far. And then next up, Branson Taylor, offensive tackle out of Pitt. I like the pick. I think it was good value. Obviously, I'm never going to fault the team for drafting depth on the offensive line unless it was like a glaring, like you could have drafted somebody else here. So I gave it a B. I thought it was good value. Nothing really to say about that pick. And R.J. Mickens, safety out of Clemson. To get him at 214, really shocking. He had like a high fourth round grade on him. So to get him pretty much in the seventh round, that is an absolute steal. That's why I gave it their steal of the draft. Only reason I give it is a B plus because safety not really a position of need in my opinion for the Chargers, but they probably had this guy rated way higher than the seventh round on his board. So take a shot on him. I like the pick. And then Trequezie Bridges, safety out of Florida. I do not think he will make the roster, unfortunately, so I did not grade this pick. Now, overall, 2 picks, both their first 2 picks, both guys with Pro Bowl potential, in my opinion, between Omarion Hampton and Trey Harris. They got 3 depth pieces on their defense, and they covered all their bases. Like every position of need they had, they addressed that. So, I mean, yeah, not a lot. I mean, their worst pick was a B minus in my opinion, and it was addressing a position of need. So, not a whole lot of negatives to say about the Chargers draft. I actually rounded up heavily here to give it a minus. Like I'm really happy for the Chargers here. If I was a Chargers fan, I would be ecstatic. So yeah, Chargers fans should be very satisfied after this draft. Moving on to the Chiefs here. Obviously perennial Super Bowl contender, still in that dynasty period. I think what would you have to do to end the dynasty? Like it would just have to be a period of not winning. Like I feel like as long as Mahomes is on the Chiefs, it's considered a dynasty, right? It's like the Patriots went like years and years like not winning Super Bowl, and they were still like it was called like a consecutive dynasty. So I don't know, but last season specifically, it just feels like the Chiefs could not do anything right on the offensive side of the ball. It's like Rasheed Rice went down early, Pacheco went down early, like out the gate. It was 2 massive contributors of their 2023 Super Bowl were just like down for the count, pretty much. I mean, Hollywood Brown was just nothing. He was supposed to be a big acquisition for them. He was just nothing all season. DeAndre Hopkins came in, but he was pretty disappointing. So it's like they were crippled on the offensive side of the ball, and the offensive line, especially left tackle, was a concern all season. So it's like, and Mahomes, of course, with all that going on, Mahomes looked extra bad. So yeah, not a great season last year for the Chiefs offensively. Still made it to the Super Bowl somehow. They're just amazing in the playoffs, dominate the AFC without a doubt. So let's take a look here at what they did to address their issues. First pick, they trade down one spot with the Eagles, get their hands on Josh Simmons. It's just, did I grade? I feel like that should be a. Oh, never mind. Wait, did I grade? Did I color code the Chiefs? This might have been their best pick. I might not have color coded the Chiefs, but if I did not, Josh Simmons was an amazing pick here at 32. According to some people, by the way, Josh Simmons was the best tackle in this draft, even with the concerns of his injury. So, with all that going on, I mean, how can you not say getting him with this pick is like the Chiefs should be like over the moon to get Josh Simmons at 32, but for some reason, some Chiefs fans are like disappointed with this pick. I don't understand. Left tackle is the biggest need on the Chiefs' entire roster. So to get a potential Pro Bowl level player at 32, like that, the Josh Simmons type players, they shouldn't be available at this, this area. So I give it an A+. I see no issues with this pick whatsoever. And you were able to trade down with the Eagles. I think they got like a fourth round pick to move down one spot and draft the guy that we're going to draft anyways. Amazing job by the Chiefs here. A+, no doubt. Probably their best pick overall. I have to come back to you on that. Number 63, they draft Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle out of Tennessee. Now, me personally, I had not done a whole lot of research about this guy, but from some guys I do trust, they were very high on Omar Norman Lott going into the NFL, and pairing him with a guy like Chris Jones, from what I've heard, is like the perfect fit, right? So they've been looking for a guy at that other D tackle position. They lost Trajan Wharton to the Panthers via free agency, so they have a massive need there at D tackle, and they fill it with a good player, potential day one starter as well. So I like that pick a lot. Gave it an A- right there. Ashton Gillette at 66. Bit of a reach from what I've seen so far. He was probably the seventh or eighth best edge rusher available, in my opinion. Now, that's not to say that he's looked bad. It's just there's a lot of really good edge rushers in this class. Ashton Gillette would not have been a guy I looked at number 66, just being honest with you. And also, I think they had some other needs. Edge rusher, not a position I probably would have addressed right here either. So, yeah, for all those reasons, I give it a C+. Now, he could still be a really good player, so keep that in mind. Noah Williams, cornerback out of California at number 85, definitely a position of need. They've been looking for another guy, not to replace L'Jarius Sneed. He was an All-Pro the year before they lost him. But yeah, cornerback certainly has been an issue for the Chiefs last year, and good value here at number 85, position of need, good player, good fit. Not a whole lot of other options here, by the way. At number 85, mostly good cornerbacks had gone off the board. So I like the value here of drafting Noah Williams. So I give that a B+ right there for the Chiefs. Next up, Jalen Royals. I definitely color code this. Jalen Royals, in my opinion, was their steal of the class. Josh Simmons was their best pick of the draft. Jalen Royals, man, second round grade on him, according to ESPN. Steve Smith is incredibly high on Jalen Royals as the prospect. Played for Utah State last season. Incredible player. I mean, really, like in a pretty loaded receiver class, he was as high as like number 4, number 5, depending on who you ask. So definitely a steal. Position of need, obviously, they really struggled last year at the wide receiver position. And he's their wide receiver 4, day one. Obviously, when Rashee Rice comes back, he's going to be up there, Xavier Worthy. But it would not shock me at all if Jalen Royals just beats out Hollywood Brown in training camp and preseason, and he's a day one starter for him. So best receiver available, position of need, A+, no doubt. Chiefs, one of the few teams with 2 A+ selections in the draft process for me. Next up, Jeffrey Bassa, number 156 linebacker out of Oregon. Now, here's the thing. If I was to rank, the positions of need for the Chiefs, the least important would be quarterback, and then second to least would be linebacker. I mean, you think linebacker for the Chiefs, you think Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquill, Nick Bolton. Like, it's their strongest position group overall. It's like I don't understand drafting a linebacker. Now, Jeffrey Bassa, he's a pretty solid player. Like, if any other team would have drafted him at 156, I'd say that's a pretty good pick. But for the Chiefs, like, there's just no way he plays an impact for you. So I don't understand that. for the Chiefs when you have other positions of need, especially Devin Neal being available right here, obviously playing at Kansas. Like, how do you not draft a guy like that when you struggled to run the ball last year and you draft linebackers? So for that reason, Jeffrey Bassa was their worst pick, in my opinion, at 156. And then finishing it off, though, with a really good running back. I like this guy a lot. Brashard Smith out of SMU. No idea how he fell to the seventh round. He's kind of a mix of a wide receiver running back. He does bring that wide receiver shiftiness and explosiveness to the running back position. But man, getting him in the seventh round, that's an absolute steal right here. Great value, position of need. And he's a versatile guy. Can you imagine all the things Andy Reid could do with the Brashard Smith, especially at the goal line? They could line him out in the slot. They could do a lot of things. I am excited. I hope Brashard Smith makes the roster as their RB3. I think that would be really exciting. Yeah, no bad picks for the Chiefs. Like their worst pick was Jeffrey Boston. That's a good player. So no bad, misses here for the Chiefs. And then they got 4 to 5 future starters for a Super Bowl contending team. Great value picks in Josh Simmons, Omar Norman Lott, Jalen Royals, of course, like really several really good value picks. And just like the Chargers, they covered all their needs, all their bases got covered, and they drafted very well late, just like the Chargers. So here is the summary for the Chiefs specifically. Gave them a 6.14, rounded up actually. Well, no, kept it as a B plus rather than rounding up. I think they had 2 picks that were kind of questionable, in my opinion, was between the Gillette. Like, for example, if they would have drafted at 66, who was available? If they would have drafted Landon Jackson, especially because the Bills got Landon Jackson later on, if they would have drafted Landon Jackson at 66 and Devin Neal at 156, I think that would have been the best draft in football. Like that would have been an A for me, damn near. So yeah, amazing draft, regardless of those picks. So here's how I had it shaken up in the AFC West. Honestly, probably the best drafting division because keep in mind the Raiders draft it was completely torn down by essentially 2 7th round picks. Like besides that, like the real draft of the Raiders, the first 5 6 rounds was really really good. So it's like overall, this division drafted incredibly well overall. So yeah, that is going to be it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new. I will be back either tomorrow or the day after with the AFC East, and we will be done with the draft grades video. I'm not going to give my full rambling speech about the draft process, but thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.